Welcome back to another Best Champions for Every Role video. This time we're diving into patch 12.11 and loads more changes have hit the Rift this week. There are plenty of familiar faces and some new ones popping in too, so hopefully this video should give you plenty of choice when choosing which of those champions you want to abuse. Before we get started, don't forget to head on over to our website at mobalytics.gg and get yourself up to date with all of the builds, runes, guides, counters and combos that we have to offer for every single champion. If you do enjoy our video guides and our content here, then we have loads more of that on our website. So whether it's one of the champions in this video or any of the other champions in the game that you want to learn how to play, then we've got you covered. Let's get into it then and start off with the top lane. First up, we've got Fiora, and she's only getting better with each patch released at the moment. Tanks got buffed too, so champions with true damage are instantly and directly better. Fiora has one of the most consistent and reliable forms of true damage in those vitals, meaning she doesn't need penetration or armor shredding items to actually do her job, and instead, she just melts all of her enemies. She has been brilliant since patch 12.10 and she was already good beforehand, but now she's one of the most contested and easily one of the strongest top lane picks that you can play. Fiora has all of the strengths that you need in the meta right now. She's got solid burst damage for those short fights. She's got good consistent DPS and mobility for those extended fights. She's got solid 1v2 potential with her ultimate's burst and dueling potential, not forgetting about his healing too. And she just has a very consistent performance from the start of the game to the end. She doesn't really have too many weaknesses, and although all solo lanes do have hard matchups, she can always still find a way to be impactful. Darius is our second pick, and much like Fiora, he was already pretty busted in patch 12.10. Again, he has a load of true damage and he's solid throughout all stages of the game. The thing about Darius though is he just seems to stomp and snowball in so many lanes. His damage from as early as level 1 to 3 is massive, and he so often ends up killing his lane opponent a couple of times before he even gets level 6, which then just leads him into snowballing that top lane so quickly. Historically, Darius always struggled with his poor teamfighting strengths, as he just seemed to get kited, CC'd and taken down. Now though, he's just way too powerful, and it's harder to kill him due to the extra health, but it's also just as difficult to actually deal with him because of how much damage and burst he can deal with that ultimate. From cleaning up fights with those ultimate resets to bleeding down his enemies over prolonged fights, or even just stomping lanes, this guy is a serious force to be reckoned with. Our third pick for the top lane is going to be Olaf. He's been so strong that he's already received a hotfix nerf since 12.11 dropped the other day. He joins Fiora and Darius in a way that he can melt down those tanks. However, instead of true damage, he has armor shred built into his Q, which is the main ability he uses to overthrow his enemies. Olaf can come out on top in lanes you simply would not expect. He can defy the odds and turn around fights and ganks and often come out of it ahead with a couple of kills. He can simply destroy his enemies in lane when he gets fed, as a lot of champions just do not have an answer to him. If you've got mobility, you might be able to kite away from it, but if you rely on CC to prevent being killed, Olaf will simply just laugh at you as he pops his ultimate, sprints towards you and takes you out without even breaking a sweat. The turret damage from 12.10 has also been nerfed again, so Olaf will be able to dive you a bit easier this patch too. He is a solid top lane choice no matter what rank you're sitting in, so it might be a time for you to take a trip down to Bromarcia. Can we all agree that Brolaf really is one of the best skins in the game though? Can you believe it came out in 2010? 12 years ago. Really? That's it for our top lane choices. Now there are seriously strong contenders that are also rising the ranks, but these three we've mentioned have too many games with too many wins to pass up on. Zac, Singed, Poppy, Lilia, Wukong, Tahm Kench, Shen, Ornn, there are tons of other very strong top laners to try though, so give them all a go. Talking of Wukong, let's move into the jungle. Wukong actually got nerfed this patch, alongside Death's Dance and more of Mortius, and quite rightly so, but it's not really made too much of a difference. This guy has been dominating the jungle since those buffs a few patches ago, and he got even stronger with the durability. He has a solid clear, decent early ganks, good objective control, low cooldown gap closers, armor shred on his Q, strong burst windows, solid damage in extended fights, and that's all before you even talk about his ultimate, which is undeniably impactful. He just has so many things that make him so good at the moment, and the fact that he is also pretty straightforward to play makes him even easier to win games on. Other champions that have been strong in the past but take a lot more skill to pull off tend to only be good in those higher ranks, but Wukong is just winning at all of them. I'm sure you've all heard enough about this champion already over the last few patches, but it's not time to stop abusing him yet, or banning him either. Another champion that's also been incredibly strong in the jungle recently, but for even longer than Wukong, is Volibear. He had a fairly gradual rise to the jungle after a relatively slow start to the season, but about halfway through he just got more and more popular, and for the last 4 or 5 patches, he's easily been one of the best junglers in the game, in the majority of ranks. Volibear's ability to completely remove one particular lane out of the game with his relentless and devastating repeat ganks is simply why he's one of the best. You've got pre-6 CC, you've got inbuilt movement speed, sustain, damage, shielding, slows, and of course that ultimate, which makes you an absolute terror when it comes to engaging and diving backlines, and towers. His durability and his DPS make him pretty damn scary when he gets fed, and unless you've got the tools to deal with tanks and the mobility to escape his unstoppable nature, you're going to struggle to beat him. He is one of those champs at the moment that if you haven't got the comp to play against it, he's strong enough to make you dodge. Whether you're silver or diamond, Volibear is a great choice to go for this patch. Our third and final jungler is going to be Nunu and Willump. The buffs Nunu received this patch have really brought him back to the scene, and when combined with those tanky item buffs, it's safe to say he's back with a vengeance. When Nunu is strong, you really notice it. When he ganks you 4 times pre-6 with that snowball, you're not going to have too much of a fun time. And if you're playing a champion with low mobility, every time you go in for a trade, you just know he's going to be there and punish you for it severely. His map mobility, his objective control, and his powerful early ganks make him a very difficult champion to play against, and it doesn't really matter what rank you're at, Nunu's playstyle will always be effective. Throughout the game, Nunu becomes incredibly tanky. He deals more damage than you'd expect, and he offers so much disruption and crowd control and constant flanking threats that you never really feel safe when you're against him. Nunu is one of those champions that you might not be as scared as when compared to the likes of other junglers when they're fed. However, when he's charging at you with that snowball and he's secured 2 rifts, 5 turrets, 3 barons, 4 dragons and an elder, you're probably going to be sat there thinking, where did it all go wrong? We also just wanted to throw a quick mention to the newest jungler and champion that came into the Rift this week, Bel'Veth. We released a guide to help you guys get started with her yesterday on our YouTube channel, so check that out if you're looking to give her a go. You can also find out her builds, her runes, combos and counters all on our website too, so click the link in the description to see for yourself. That brings us to the mid lane. Not too much has changed here, and although we expected a massive lethality item overhaul, Riot have scrapped those changes for now, and we're pretty much just seeing all the usual suspects that we've seen in 12.10. The first one of those we're going to talk about is Zilean. Despite being incredibly strong, undeniably impactful and fairly easy to play, he's still not got actually as high of a play rate as you might have expected. He has a lot less games played so far when compared to other more popular champions. However, his win rate is simply something you cannot ignore. Zilean is having a fantastic time in both the support and the mid lane, but when you build him with some damage in that mid lane, you get that experience, that ability haste, you're going to feel like you're playing with cheats enabled. Zilean can clear waves easily, he can roam like a madman, and he can set up ganks and fights so reliably with those double bombs. Basically, you just rush Everfrost and Lucidity Boots and run around the map like an old man in a time machine. Wait, that sounds a bit familiar. With that added CC from Everfrost, you can never really miss those bombs, and with the ability haste from those boots, you can spam them like they're going out of fashion. Zilean's mobility is surprisingly underrated with his E, and it also feels like you're trapped indefinitely when he uses it on you as a mini exhaust. His ultimate is also one of the most game-defining abilities in the late game, and due to the sheer amount of utility he provides, even if he's weak or behind or even not that good at the game, one good ultimate can easily win those fights by itself. Their second pick is someone who's definitely a lot more popular though, and he's having a pretty insane season so far, Viktor. One of the OG Luden's Tempest Shadowflame abusers, and that's still his most successful build even now all these patches later. Viktor truly is Mr. Consistent in that mid lane. He's got a solid lane phase, he scales like a monster, he has solid close range burst and poke, good mid range all in potential, AoE damage, AoE CC, he really does have a hell of a lot to offer. He might not feel like a beast too early in the game, but when you hit those power spikes you realise just how often people constantly underestimate you. With an item or two and some experience under his belt, Viktor's damage starts slapping, and whether it's a 5-man ultimate, a max range laser, or even popping a melee enemy with your Q and auto attack, it feels damn good to play with. Viktor has a huge amount of consistent matchups, and there always seems to be a way for him to get out of bad ones without being too far behind too. Viktor has great contributions to early fights around objectives, and the later the game goes on, the better this guy gets. From rising to popularity with the pre-season changes and Arcane popping off to still being one of the most sought after mid lane choices 11 patches into the season. Viktor was an easy choice for one of the best champions in this video. Moving on to our third and final mid laner, we're going to go for Kassadin. Ahri and Veigar probably do just come out ahead of him, but you know what, we're just fed up of talking to you guys about why they are so good, and you guys are probably bored of hearing about them too. Kassadin is another one of those champions that when he's good, you just hate playing against him. He might not have the most consistent of lane phases, and if he gets bullied and punished in the early game, he might not get to the stage where he truly 1v9s. But if he goes even, he farms up and scales, or God forbid he gets fed, you're going to instantly remember how mental a good Kassadin can be. His kit is pretty basic. You farm up with the auto attack reset on your W, you harass your enemy with your Q, and you get to level 6 as soon as possible. Then you become so much more difficult to punish. You can roam a lot easier, and you can start scaling up to become that level 16 monster that we all know. Late game Kassadin's AoE damage, his mobility, his burst, and his carry potential are just insane. And there's very few champions in the game that can rival this. You're going to need a hell of a lot of reliable CC, and you're also probably going to need Kassadin to misplay to actually beat him at this stage in the game. We definitely haven't seen as much of Kassadin so far this season, but right now he's in a really good spot, so give him a go. Right, well that brings us to the bottom lane, and now let's take a look at those AD carries. The first one is one that became absolutely nuts with patch 12.11, and has already been hotfix nerfed but still incredibly strong, and that's going to be Zeri. Zeri got buffed this week, and it's safe to say she's gone from one of the worst AD carries in the game to one of the best again. Definitely one of the hardest champions in the game to balance right now. She still suffers from a very poor pre-6. She can struggle to push for a level advantage in the early game and can easily lose out on those early fights with minions and other champions blocking her Q. But that does seem to pretty much be her only weakness right now. Her all-in at level 6 is much stronger than previously, and her scaling means she just gets better and better from this point onwards. Zeri's consistent damage output is nuts, and when you pair that with her mobility and her combo potential, you've got a really fun champion to play. I've been playing with her a lot since the patch, and can safely say I'm having an absolute blast. I mean, it probably helps that she's insanely strong, but still, she's a lot of fun. When you start popping off in those big team fights, it really feels how she was designed to play. Darting around the rift, popping heads, kiting away and dealing some juicy damage if you can pull it off. It's really refreshing to see a relatively different AD carry come into the meta again, after so many weeks of Jinx and Vayne. Now that we're steering away from that bulky setup from before, she really does feel like an AD carry. Shield Bow is back in one of the top AD carry item spots, and with that and an Essence Reaver, you seriously start feeling a bit godlike. If you haven't played at this patch yet, definitely give her a go. Our second AD carry to go for this patch is going to be Lucian. He's always been one of the best early AD carries in the game, and you just offer so much damage and snowball potential from as early as level 2 or 3. If you get fed and spike early on this guy, you just seem to destroy people, especially if you're paired with the right support like a Nami. Gale Force is still in a very good spot at the moment, and Lucian is easily one of the best users of this item. Maybe only Jhin can say he gets a bit more out of it. With your E-Dash and your Gale Force, it is very difficult for low mobility enemies to deal with you, and you can really abuse this to farm and excel your lead if you have one already. Throughout games, Lucian might not scale as well as some of the other AD carries. In the very late game, you may struggle with your limited range, but if you're good enough, you can still make him more than viable. The early to mid game is really where Lucian shines though, and there's not much your enemies are going to be able to do when you're super fed in that mid game and one-shotting everyone that tries to kill you. Our third and final AD carry in this patch is going to be Twitch. Despite Kraken Slayer being nerfed, Blade of the Ruined King got buffed, and it doesn't really matter anyway because Twitch has just been insane since those durability changes. The extra health really made a difference throughout the early game, as it makes his laning so much safer, and he doesn't just get deleted every time he walks up to get CS now. Twitch's damage over time with his poisons, his ambush potential with his ultimate, and his general scaling throughout the game make him a nightmare to deal with. And you can definitely feel how strong he is when you're against a good one. Twitch has a fairly unique assassin-like playstyle with his stealth, which grants him the ability to sneak up on his lane opponents and take out enemies who might be overstaying for those extra plates and waves. But this also means he's one of the only AD carries in the game that has the ability to roam and gank other lanes easily too. When a Twitch has those items in the mid game and he opens up on an enemy team with his ultimate, the AoE damage and burst he can deal is incredible. And if he has those mechanics too, this champion can carry a huge amount of games. Let's finish off with those supports now, and these might be a few familiar faces. Senna is obviously still one of the best supports in the game, but she did get nerfed this patch, and these three just make it just in front of her. The first one we're going to talk about is Janna. Ever since her changes back towards the start of the season, she's been one of the best supports to go for. People were worried that it seemed like a nerf originally, but then they realised that actually they made her a little bit broken. Janna's Tornado is fantastic now as it's a bit quicker, and she can set up ganks, disengage, and just generally be way more impactful with it, rather than just randomly using it in lane now and again for a bit of poke. She has tons of utility at her disposal, and this is truly what the support role is all about at the moment. She's got slows, pre-6 CC, she's got disengage, AoE healing, low cooldown shields, and even her passive movement speed boost can really come in clutch. The durability update also made Janna a lot less punishable. She's much harder to kill in the early game now, which was a huge weakness that aggressive supports often exploited. Now though, she can lane into almost anyone, and often get out safely into the mid game where she really comes into her own. Janna is fantastic at protecting all sorts of bot lane choices too. She helps vulnerable AD carries like Vayne get through that early game and offers fantastic peel for them in teamfights. But she also benefits aggressive ones like Draven and Lucian, making them even stronger with that AD in her shield. Janna also fulfills that real support feel and playstyle too though, diving into teams, healing, shielding and saving everyone from certain death. And if that wasn't enough, you can also pull off some pretty flashy stuff too, if you're feeling brave enough. Our second support pick is Renata Glasc. She's pretty much been one of the best supports since she came out, after people figured out how to use her and how to build her. The general theme for supports in this patch is, you guessed it, utility, and she has a boatload. Renata Glasc has damage in her passive, she has multiple target CC and disengage in her Q. Her W has those buffs and boosts and a crazy revive mechanic, and her E damages slows and shields. All of this is just pre-6, and then she's got that ultimate which can completely change the course of any fight if used correctly. Renata is definitely a support that gets better the longer the game goes on. Yes, she has good gank setup early game and some amazing ways to turn fights around, but there's no denying just how strong her kit is in those mid to late game teamfights. When she's partnered up with an aggressive AD carry like a Samira or a Draven, they can just play so much more recklessly, and often get away with it because of Renata's W. There really is so much that this champion has to offer, so it's pretty obvious why she has one of the highest win rates for any supports in almost every single rating. Our third and final support, and our last champion to talk about today, is going to be Bard. He's had a fairly quiet season so far, but slowly but surely he's creeping his way back up into the meta, and now he has a surprisingly high win rate across the majority of ranks. Bard struggled pretty heavily against those aggressive supports previously, but also against those sustaining powerhouses too, as he found it difficult to match them in lane. Well, now the game is all about scaling utility, Bard is instantly more impactful. He has so many creative ways to outplay his enemies, from his super unique Q stun to his magical journey that allows him to zoom around the map collecting chimes and ruining his enemies' lanes. Bard's ultimate is also absolutely crazy and can easily carry the game if he uses it well enough. It can also ruin the game too though, so it does take a lot of practice. If you pair Bard up with certain champions on your team, his ultimate can be amazing. If you hit a 5-man ultimate into a Veigar stun, you've probably won the game. Bard is not only one of the best champions in that support role right now, but he's also a hell of a lot of fun. If you've never played him, I'd highly recommend giving him a go. Well, that's going to bring us to the end of this video, all about the best champions to play in all roles so far in patch 12.11. We hope you agree with our choices and let us know in the comments who you're having the most success with. Don't forget to check out our website by clicking the link in the description below. Thanks for watching guys, and we'll see you all in the next video. Take care.